504, 505, and 506. Absentees are 446, 454, 455, 450, 463, 472, 74,
472 present, sir.
4,
72.
okay, 474, 476, 478, 481, 487, 97, 500, 502, 504, 505, and 506.
Sir, 446 present.
Fine. So then meet you, man.
Sir, 455 present.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
455 present, sir.
Okay.
So 454 present. I joined a bit late.
Name?
So Divya.
Okay.
Sir, 478.
Wait one second. Oh, yeah, join late. You have to be on time, right? Later, I review. Listen. Screen is visible? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, I'm going to discuss about the topic what all overall view of database management system. You're already familiar with your definitions. What do you mean by database management system? And how? What is the difference between your file processing system, this database management system? If we look at the overall system architecture of database management system, the very first layer, that is the very first layer, it's known as a user. So overall, the user belongs to the database. What are all the users? All the users is going to access your database through the application. So through the application programs or administrative tools. So that's why depending on the user, they will be use the necessary software. With the help of the software, they can able to create the table in the database or retrieve the content from the table. So if you look at the very first user, it's about naive user. Naive user, it's your end user. As a customer, if you consider any commercial e-commerce website, so as you are an end customer, you are purchasing a product in the website. So you are a naive user by using your their application. So naive user can be merchant or customer, so those will be called as a naive user. They will be use only the application interface. With the help of graphical user interface, you can able to access your database. The next level of user, naive user only they can able to use. They will not able allowed to write the query into the database. So the next level of user is known as your application programmer, whereas the application programmer will allows to access the database with the help of the application program. What is the role of application programmers? So they will be able to execute the respective query. For example, you guys are using graphical user interface with the help of buttons, right? So, for example, you add to cart and go for purchase after confirmation of the order, right? So they will be place the order at the backend. So for the particular graphical user pay button, so what action has to be done? So for your record insertion operation has to be done, right? So the application programmer will map with the customer. So they will be allowed to set the operation for individual customer. So that is the purpose of application programmer. Next type of user will be called as a sophisticated user or data analyst. So this person will allow to use the query tools. So what are all the query tools is there, like they can use SQL Plus or Oracle or any database query tools. With the help of database query tools, they will allow to access your database. The role of this database analyst, especially, they will be allowed to create or managing the table. So they'll be allowed to use DML commands. If any, for example, if you purchase any new product, the order ID will be get generated, right? So they'll be allowed to insert the record in row for the particular table. So if they are having the date table in that respective date today, so overall will be able to place the order, like order ID, customer name, shipping address. Likewise, they will be allowed to insert the data. So a DML query, right? For example, if you want to update your mobile number, if you have updated the address, so this will be immediately that query it will be get executed with the help of the database analyst. Not only they will be use this, uh, they can able to access the privilege of view, or certain privileges can be done in the table, like giving permission to the naive user, or this will be the role of database analyst. So they'll be use the query tools. The final user, it's very important and crucial user. It's known as a database administrator. So only the person database administrator is responsible to design your database. You already aware. So design means the database schema. So how the schema has to be there, whether the order ID has to be act as a primary key, or any foreign key has to be created, any constraints they have to create it. So they'll be verify the customer. So all the database administrator activities, especially the DDL commands, can be executed with the help of the administration too. So the role of database administrator I'm going to discuss. The main role is about they'll be give the privileges to user. They'll be grant permissions to even sophisticated user database analysts. So they are the right persons to access those table or not. So likewise, they'll be able to design their own schema. So for this purpose, they'll be use the administration tool. Administration tool is this, again, your DB query tools. They'll be use your SQL Plus or Oracle application. With help of this, they can able to use. So this is your first level. Higher level, the users will able to access your table database with the help of the respective application program or database query tools. So the next level, the first level is a user level. The next level is known as a query processor. So what is a query processor here? So all the application program as well as database query tools is to be communicate with the query processor. Your query processor is your query evaluation engine. Guys, following? So the query processor will be able to analyze the query, and then it will be able to execute the query. So this is your guys following. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So it's a query evaluation engine will be called. So what are all the query written by the database administrator or a database analyst, it's going to be executed by the query processor. This query processor consists of DDL interpreter, DML queries, and compiler and linker. So this query processor contains two compiler. One is DDL compiler, another one is DML compiler. So, so why we draw near to this database administrator? Why we draw DML to this DB analyst? Any idea? Yes. Why the sophisticated user not allowed to use DDL interpreter? That is database analyst. Any idea? So always the DDL interpreter, that is the DDL commands such as create, renaming the table, or alter, modify, truncate, drop. So these are all the set of DDL commands. Only the database administrator have privilege to use these commands. So he is the authorized person to execute this command in the query processor evaluation engine. So that's why the database administrator near you have to draw the DDL interpreter. So therefore, as database the analyst, like the database analyst, it's your developer. So it will be called database developer, application programmer, or application user, program developer. They will be allowed to use the DML queries. DML queries, you already aware, they will be use insert command, or they will be allowed to use update, delete, so other select command. So this will be able to execute with the help of the application programmer. So why we draw this line? The database administrator have privilege to access both DDL as well as DML. That's why we have drawn this line. So the database administrator will execute both DDL and DML commands in your query processor engine. So finally, uh, always, as I mentioned, the application, the naive user, it's going to use the application interface. How the application interface will work? The application interface will be a exe file of the application program object code. So with the help of application program object code, so this is the user, they will be able to retrieve or create the query. For example, if you are sign up your web page, filling all the text fields, and if you click sign up, immediately the sign up will be execute a query to create the particular user mail id in the server database for the user. So so they can able to access through the help of application program code only. So all both DDL and DML queries, it's going to be compiled and linked with the help of the respective compiler and linker. So we will have separate DDL compiler and DML compiler. This is DML compiler and organizer, and DDL compiler and organizer. So finally, this is the core where the query evaluation engine will execute the respective query is requested by the user. So whether it may be a end user, or it may be a application programmer, or database analyst, or database administrator, whoever return the raise the query according to their privileges. So those all those queries will be executed in the query evaluation engine. So this is the role of query processor, second stage. So you have to draw this diagram and you have to explain each and every component. And the next stage is your storage manager. So immediately what the query evaluation will do, the query evaluation will uh, do the next level like storage manager. Storage manager, we will have different types of manager. So first one is buffer manager, second one is file manager, third one is authorization and integrity. Last one is transaction manager. So as soon as the query evaluation engine, it will verify the authorization and integrity manager. So what is the authorization and integrity manager? Whether you are a database administrator, you can able to access the if you are a database administrator, you can able to access the data dictionary. Your data dictionary only contains the information about the user, what user you are, whether you are a naive user or application programmer or a database analyst or database administrator. Your credential informations will be available in the data dictionary of the disk storage. So this is your disk storage, the cylindrical structure where you're storing your data physically. This will be called as a disk. So you are already aware we'll be having redundant array of inexpensive disks. They will be generally used for a database. In that, the data dictionary is the table where it will refer what who are all the user, what are all the username, privileges, credentials. So everything is verified by the authorization and integrities manager. Then only the particular query will be evaluated by the query evaluation engine. For example, if you have login as a database application developer, so what will happen? You are not allowed to use DDL command. So this query is restricted for the particular user. So this will be identified with the help of data dictionary, and authorization and integrity manager will get verified. So this is the first thing for user also. Then next, for the query, uh, we will be having a buffer manager. Buffer manager, the table has to be loaded, right? Like for if you are executing select star from table name, so those data or table, it will be loaded in the buffer manager. The data required for the table and what is the output, the query execution, it will be available in your buffer manager. Then only it will be loaded into the graphical user interface. So the next manager, it's about will be called as a file manager. So this file manager will tells about indices, like what all the where the exactly the particular file is get located in the disk storage. I'll tell the functionality meanwhile. So one more manager is known as a transaction manager. Here only the transaction means will be called execution of, if you are executed one query, will be called one transaction. Operation on the particular data based on a query is known as a single transaction. So all the transaction will be get managed with the help of transaction manager. So what's the purpose of transaction manager? Transaction manager is to be establish the concurrency control, how they are managing the transaction concurrently, and which users having the privileges to access to execute the transaction, and which transaction has to be executed first. That it will be decided by the transaction manager. So overall will be called, the third level is known as your storage manager. And the last one, that is, you can say last one is a disk storage. So disk storage will be called as a physical level. If you talk about the physical level, this is we can say physical level where actually the data is get stored. So in the disk storage, we will be having a data. Data means like if you're having a table, right? It does not contain the schema. It generally have, for example, if it is an employee database, employee number, salary, designation, right? So all information, it will be stored in your physical memory. For example, 1001 physical memory register number, 1002 physical memory name, 1004. It need not to be stored in sequential. It can have any order of data structure, and the particular row record, it will be stored in the, it will be considered as a data. Then the information about the data will be available in your data dictionary. Data dictionary only contains the metadata, how those all those data are interrelated between them. Whether we are using what the data type of the particular table, and what is the relationship among the column, So what is the table name they have stored? So all the information it's available, the schema. Immediately the database administrator created the schema, right? The schema will be get created in the data dictionary alone, and the data will be stored in the data. So now we'll have two more parameter that is known as indices and statistical data. Indices is will always allow to access the data faster. So that means we will be called indexing and hashing technique. With the help of indexing and hashing technique, the respective data is located in which memory, and how they easily they will be go for navigate or seeking the respective data based on the indices on the table. So then only they can able to identify. That's why the buffer manager and file manager have the privileges to refer the indices and data to locate the respective uh, row in the table or a respective record according to the query. For example, if you have written select star from table name where employee number equal to you have given one number, right? So that will be act as a primary key. So the particular number it will be check the employee table indices. So this indices having the primary key. So from that primary key it will be easily located your data. How if you consider any book, how your index page will be work, referring the page number, right? So referring the page number in which memory cells those data is available. So you'll be calling if you studied in paging and segmentation technique in memory, the same concept you'll be using here. So this is about your disk storage. So this is the overall idea of overall architecture of a database management system, how it will be work. If you have any doubt, you can raise. Yes. Shall we move on to next? Okay, we'll be discuss in detail. So whatever I have mentioned, it's there. First, users are differentiated by the way you expect to interact with the system. That means, as I mentioned, the end users always can be classified based on the tools or application program and what you are using. Based on this only, I can identify whether you are a naive user or database administrator or application programmer. So it is based on what how you are interact with the system. So when you go for the application programmer will always interact with the system with the help of DML calls. So they will be allowed when they if you are using DML commands, the application program can able to use with the help of the DML commands only. So sophisticated user or specialized user will be having the same sophisticated is divided into a two user. So the main role of this user, it's about what are all the request form. Like for example, initially in website, like you'll be place a HTTPS get or post request, right? So those form requests you have made in a database query, those users will be called as a sophisticated user, and sometimes they'll be, if needed, will be called a specialized user. So when specialized user, they'll be able to write the database application. So next user is, for example, if we consider an organization, for organization, uh, the bank tellers or clerical staff, overall the staff belongs to the particular organization. So they will be called as a naive user. Uh, so sometimes the first thing like the database administrator is the owner of the database. Owner of the database means like they will be allowed to create the schema for the database. I'm going to discuss about what is the purpose of database administrator and what are all the roles of the database administrator. So in the case of database administrator, so they are responsible to for coordinate the activities of the database system. So what are all the activities has to be done? So not only creating the schema, they will be give the grant and revoke permission to the user, and they are responsible to create the view for the user. So consider in our university database itself. In your university database, they will be for example academia. Academia is maintained by Zogo Corporate. In that Zogo team, they will what are all the client requirements. The client requirements is placed to the user. That is the client requirements is SRM place a request client. The SRM is a client, and those requests was processed by the vendor. That is Zogo. It's a vendor. Like they will be able to provide a database system for us. So in that Zogo people, certain database administrator will be there, like a database administrator team. So with the help of database administrator team, they are going to create the schema for the university database. So you think in such a way that like they are responsible for activities, whatever the activities is going to happen in your database system. So, what are all the main roles of a database administrator, or you can say what is database administrator responsibilities? So, the very first important thing it's about database administrator role. It's to be define the database schema. So, it's to define the database schema means as you are already aware, and he is responsible to create the schema like. What are all the table, how many tables has to be created for each and every table, how many columns should be there, and what is the data type for the column, what is the key referential integrity, which column has to be act as a primary key, and it will have what are all the integrity constraints we can have. They'll be decide, and which column will be act as a referential integrity, and how many tables we can have. So all responsibility, all schema definitions can be done with the help of the database administrator. This is the first role, schema definition. The second role is, guys following?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. The second role is about storage structure and access method definition. The second role is what type of data structure he has to be handled for the particular database, whether he has to use graph or tree data structure or linked list or queue, depending on the requirement, and all the storage data structure will be decided by the database administrator, and access method also, like as I mentioned, how many indexing tables should be there, and how the memory is get divided, and which this table is stored where, physically in your disk drive. So they, with the help of the those operating system, and they are going to define the data structure for the table. So that is the second role. Then third role is it's about the schema and physical organization modification. Schema and physical organization modification means like where exactly the server has to be get located, and they'll be usually they'll be having treated as a master and local server. Periodically, they are going to maintain the backup, like maintenance of server will be called as a backup of the server. Server maintenance will be done properly by the database administrator with the proper information to the clients. So nowadays, whatever the server maintenance, you will be get intimation to the user. Then after that only the data migration or backup or server maintenance can be done. So those will be initiator or database administrator will have all responsibilities during data migration, because the data should not be lost, and there will be also if any failure in data migration on server migration, so they will be easily able to recover the data. So this is the very crucial process, their responsibility. And the next role it's about the database administrator give privileges to the user. So what are all the privileges to user? They can give grant and revoke grant permission to or revoke. Grant means they are giving the permission to the users. Revoke means they are get back the permissions to the user. So now who are all the user? The database administrator will give permissions not only to the all the user other than DBA. All the user means even for application programmer, even for database analyst. That is your who will allow to use certain DML commands and which table is visible to which people, which user. So all the responsibility will be done by the database administrator. Even how many views for the particular table has to be created, and so this and all can be give privileges by the database administrator alone. So in the next role, it's about specifying integrity constraint. Specifying integrity constraints, as I have mentioned, we have different types of constraint known as null constraint, not null, and check constraint. So if it is if you define make any column as a not null constraint, for example, a mobile number column should be a not null. You can't able to leave as empty when you are inserting a row into record into the table. So those integrity constraints has to be specified by database administrator as well as the primary key. So the primary key, the default constraint, it's a primary key is about a unique constraint, and those unique constraints violation will be carried out by the primary key. So he or she is responsible for the specifying the integrity constraint, and he is the act as a central person for all the user. So for verifying, if for example, if you are registered for the user, you are asking the request to access the database, and the database administrator only allows the respective user to access those content of the table. Otherwise, they will be ignored. If you are, for example, if you are not belong to the if you're not belong to the student of this particular university, how they will be get verify you are not a privileged user or not. Like they'll be ask your details, and if you are an intruder for the database, obviously you are not allowed to execute certain queries login. So this will be verified by the database administrator, and database administrator is going to set privileges for each and every user. If you are a student, only you can view the mark. You can't able to edit the mark. As a professor or instructor, we are having privileges to insert the mark and edit the mark. So that's the difference between the user. So those and all schedule or this schema will be defined by the database administrator. The last role it's about they can allow to monitoring the performance and responding the changes in the requirements. So monitoring the performance means like n number of queries is going to be processed in your database. So what is the load for the database if you are going to access, and how the performance of the server database server based on the n number of client requests has to be happened. So if there is any modifications, and uh, how they can improve the performance of the system, so that can be monitored or analyzed by the database administrator. These are all the very crucial role. The next management is known as a transaction manager. As I mentioned, a transaction management is a process. So where we will be perform concurrency control manager. Concurrency control manager means n number of transaction can be happen simultaneously, concurrently. Uh, so this concurrency control manager only to be ensure the consistency of the database, because as I mentioned, for example, you consider the transaction T1. For a one table balance, your balance account balance is 500 rupees. Okay, transaction T1, it's going to be deposit 1000 rupees. Transaction T2, it's going to be withdraw 2000 rupees. Fine. If transaction T1 is executed first, your balance will be negative because 500 rupees is there. If you withdraw 1000 rupees minus 500, always the balance will not be negative. That is known as your will be called atomicity property. The data should be consistent. It should not contain a negative value. Likewise, if you have the check constraint, it will be violated. So if I execute a transaction T2 first, you are depositing 1000 rupees and then withdrawal. Uh, you are depositing 1000 rupees and you are withdrawing 1500 rupees for T1. So this sequence of transaction has to be serialized or will be called a schedule manager that can be done in the transaction management. So in the case of your transaction management, it's ensured whenever the system failure, not only system failure like power failure or any disaster, natural disaster happen in your server and the operation system crash, the transaction manager will responsible for redo undo operation will be called redo undo operation. So that's why if you think about your ATM server or if your online banking system itself, if you depend on any payment gateway, if you your money will be get debited from the bank side and recovery will be happen within 2 days, right? So how the recovery happens, who is get initialize those recovery? So that's why they are depending on the payment gateway, whether it is a Citibank or whatever may be the payment gateway server. So always a unique ID will be created for the transaction. So this will contain your a transaction number and what is the amount it's going to be transferred, success or not. If it is failed, automatically it will perform redo operation for the respective transaction so that only you are getting back your money automatically within a few days, within a day. Actually the payment gateway will be generate a log based on the log recovery. They will be able to identify the failure transaction and it will be initiated immediately within 24 hours or within 6 hours periodically, but from the bank side they are getting delay to credit the same money into your account. So this is the automation, no one is doing manually for you. So this whole thing is monitored with the help of the transaction management. So the next manager is about your storage manager. The storage manager will be called between the low level. Low level is your physical level, and between the higher level, storage manager will have the responsible. So whatever the queries you are executing, that will be available in your buffer manager and file manager. So the storage manager will be responsible to interact with the file manager. So whenever you are retrieving or updating the content in the table, so the file manager will be get with help of file manager, the data will be get updated where exactly the data is there, because so two copy of data should not be stored in your updating the particular row. Only one copy of data will be available in your uh, single table of your database. So that can be managed by through the file manager. Any doubt? I'll move on to next topic. Before that, I want to discuss the cycle test one syllabus is unit one. Do you got your CT one timetable? Did you aware about your CT one timetable? No, right? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, our exam is on.
31st.
No. A slot. A slot. Our exam on 3. Day order 1. 3 Thursday. February 3. Day order 1. Batch 1 you are. So morning 8 to 9. cycle test 1 syllabus is unit 1. Fine. So I have almost completed one last topic I have to take for unit 1. I have completed unit 1. You just try to go not only restricted to this PPT, try to learn your PDF of a textbook. Textbook also I'll be upload. Uh, you have to prepare accordingly. MCQ as well as descriptive will be there. 25 marks exam question pattern I will tell later. So this is you are going to be planned for unit 1, that is cycle test 1. One second. One minute. So fine. We'll move on to next topic. The next topic is about application architecture. So it will be called what is the tier architecture will be used in your database management system. So generally, we will be having two types of tier architecture for your database management system. Will be called two-tier architecture. Another one is about three-tier architecture. So what is two-tier and three-tier? If you look at the diagram for two-tier architecture, consider a database management system. So database system will be reside in as it will be act as a database server. Database server will has to be connected with the client system. So if the client system itself contains a application program, means like for example, a number of clients will be there, will be connected to the server through the network, right? So one user, the same user is going to use the application program. That means the database tools they are going to use in their own PC, and they are going to interact with the server directly. It's known as your two-tier architecture. So how this two-tier architecture can be established? Only the client can be able to connect with your database with the help of drivers. Will be called ODBC and JDBC driver, Object Database Connectivity, or Java Database Connectivity driver. With the help of this driver only, the user application program has to be connected with your database system. So you are going to do assign that is you are going to do a project for a database management system. So you have to, so as I have mentioned, like two students you have to make join as a project, like one project you have to choose, one project title you have to choose. So among the class, the project title should be unique for a batch. So two in a batch you can combine, and you can start doing your project now onwards. So first you give your project title. I will be collect your project title in WhatsApp. You just fill the Google form, and for what you are supposed to do it for do for your project. So project like implementation you have to do. You can use SQL Plus, or you can use MySQL. So MySQL in your local system, you have to install server. You can use Apache Tomcat server, localhost, any localhost server you can use. With the help of the localhost server, you have to connect with the database. So as usual, you have to create your table, create your database schema, and not only simply insert the value into the query. You have to make one GUI. You can use Python tkinter. With the help of Python tkinter graphical user interface, you can connect with your database either, or you can use MySQL. MySQL also you can use with the for the project. PHP MyAdmin also you can use. Graphical user interface, it's like you have to design your own website of the respective application, and from this only you have to store and retrieve the content that is record in the table. Likewise, you have to do one project. So get ready for that. So if you are going to use the two-tier architecture, your project is going to be two-tier architecture, because when you are going to show the demo, the application will be reside in the client system, and to demonstrate purpose, you will be use PHP admin or any type of server, WAMP server or Apache Tomcat local server. With the help of local server, you are going to connect with the database, and you are going to show the demo within your laptop. That is your two-tier architecture. Instead of that Apache Tomcat local server or WAMP server, the server will be reside in somewhere else in that region. Uh, with the help of network only, they can able to communicate. So that is the two-tier. So whereas a three-tier architecture, uh, application, the database, not only the server will be there, the database system will be there. It will have one separate server, will be called application server. That application server will be get installed in their regional, whether they are using any type of server to able to communicate with the database system. Application servers they will be used, and from the user side only they will be having the client application. Client application means simply they will be having a URL to load the web page. With the help of the JSP page, they can able to make a request here. So with the help of HTTP get request response model, that means the query will be executed in the application server only. But here the query request will be processed in your application itself. So that is the difference. Two-tier and three-tier means two-tier architecture. You will be write a query, right, like prime create table name. So that query will be available in the client system. Whereas for three-tier, the query will not be available in any client system. The query will be available in the data server. Simply they will be placed the request with the help of graphical user interface, and the query which will be get executed by the database system. So that's why we'll in three-tier we'll be having a user application client, and in your network we'll be having your application server. So through the network it can be able to communicate. So example for three-tier architecture is your web-based application. All the web-based application will be use your three-tier. Right now we are using three-tier architecture for Google or any type of web-based services. Do you have any doubt in the architecture?
No, sir.
Yeah. So I have done with unit 1. I'm going to move on unit 2. So your preparation for exam is very very important, and for project also try to complete start your project. Assignment 1 I'll post it in this here. You have to prepare for assignment one. Finally, you have to maintain as a portfolio. Portfolio means what all the assignments and projects you have doing in your course. Finally, you have to submit it in a single PDF file. So those document is valid for higher order thinking skill evaluation other than your question paper cities. So concentrate on more on project and try to implement and learn uh, the practical implementation of this course. Fine. I'll move on to next. Before that, I confirm with your attendance. Answer attendance triple four
Present, sir.
five 445
Sir,
four
he
forty
gave in the chat box.
446
Present, sir.
447
Present, sir.
448
Present, sir.
49
Present, sir.
50
Present, sir.
52 51 451 52
Present, sir.
54
Present, sir.
55
Present, sir.
57
Present, sir.
50
57.
58
Present, sir.
59
Present, sir.
60
Present, sir.
61
Present, sir.
62
Present, sir.
63 64 65
Present, sir.
66
Present, sir.
67
Present, sir.
68
Present, sir.
69
Present.
70
Present, sir.
71
Chat box, sir.
72
Present, sir.
73
Present, sir.
74 75 76 77 78
Present, sir.
79
Present, sir.
80
Present, sir.
81 82
Present, sir. Sir, 451 in the chat box.
82
Present,
80
sir.
83
Present, sir.
84
Present, sir.
85
Present, sir.
86
Present, sir.
87 88
Present, sir.
89 90
Present, sir.
91
Present, sir.
92
Present, sir.
93 94 95
Present, sir.
96
Present, sir.
97 98
98 present, sir.
99
99 present, sir. Present, sir.
501
Present, sir.
502 3
Present, sir.
4 502 505
Present, sir.
506
Present, sir. 506.
So 475%, sir.
okay.
Sir, 477
Sir,
as well.
Hmm.
sir 464.
Okay, that's it, right? 10 absent. So, in Unit 2, we are going to discuss about ER model. As you are already aware about what do you mean by data model and what are all the different types of data model? Anyone? Yes. Define data model. Do respond. What are the different types of data model?
Sir, like network model, ER model, object relational data model.
Yes, correct. So data model means how the logical structure of the database is get model. Logical structure means like what is the relationship among the columns, how we are going to handle it. As you are aware, we are using different types of model. So what we have studied is known as relational model, relational database model. So in this unit, we are going to discuss about an entity relational model. It's one of the type of model. So you should know what is the course learning outcome, CLO mapping and objective, course outcome and all. So as you are already aware, we are in National Education Policy 2020. Whatever the course you are studying, you should have the outcome, what all the topics you have studied. So likewise, CLR is also course learning rational. So the outcome of this unit, finally, you will be able to design the ER model as well as relational model, both model. So we are going to discuss in this unit. So how we are going to implement this. So once again, you have to clear with different types of model, like level, different types of level. What do you mean by data independence or degree of data abstractions? Anyone? The data independence are based on three level. First one is physical level. Second one is conceptual level or logical level. Third level is view level. So this is the three levels of data abstraction for the database. So if they ask degree of data abstractions or what are all the what are all the levels of database, you should remember three level. First one is physical, second one is conceptual or logical, third one is view level. So if we talk about the physical level only it contains the uh, record, like what data you are going to store. Like for example, the same employee number means the number you will be having, the salary you are having. So this will be stored exactly in your data. Whereas your conceptual level or logical level, here only they'll be tell about the relationship among the data. So this data it's belong to which table and what is the data type uh, for the particular table. So the database administrator always they are going to define not only the logical schema, they will define both schema, logical as well as the physical schema. So what we are creating using create table name, that is known as your logical schema. So what is physical schema actually? Along with logical schema, uh, you are having mentioning the size, right? Like number of 10 or integer. Integer size is 32. It shows in SQL Server. So 32-bit, how the bytes is going to be allocated in your memory and what is the data structure. So this only talks about your physical level. Two types of data independence is there: physical data independence and logical data independence. If we talk about the physical data independence, whenever the modification happen in the physical level, so if you are going to migration of data from one storage disk storage to another disk storage, or if you are going to modify instead of a number of 10, you are going to modify number of 20. It does not going to affect your logical conceptual level. Why? Because that what is the schema relationship between the table, it's not going to be modified. For example, if you consider the student table, student register number, name, marks will be there. If you are going to create those table, if you make student register number as a primary key, and you're having the data type it's their number of 10, it's not going to modify the logical schema in the way in which other table or get related, or if the physical level is changed. So whenever the physical modification is going to be changed, it does not affect any level, not only the conceptual level or logical level, it doesn't affect the view level also. So that is known as a physical data independence. So go through the definition carefully. Definitely you will get this question: physical data independence and logical data independence. For us, logical data independence, if we talk about the logical data independence, whenever the any modification in your logical conceptual level. So, for example, if you drop one, if you drop a column, if you are going to delete a particular row or record using a delete DML command, it is not going to affect your physical level, and the original schema also will not be affect if you are going to uh, any modification is going to be happen at the logical level. If you drop the column, if you add a column or modify or using alternate modify, if you are changing the data type of the column, or you are modify the integrity key constraint, or if you are adding and making a null as a not null constraint. So whatever the logical schema, your logical data you are going to modify in the conceptual schema, it does not going to affect your lower level as a physical level as well as the higher level as a view level. So try to clear with this topic. It's very very important in for interview based also. They'll be asked what do you define logical data independence, conceptual data independence, or logical or conceptual or physical data independence. You just thorough with this topic, then only you can understood unit one. Without this, you can't able to complete. If you have doubt also, you can ask for that. Okay. So in this unit, we are going to discuss about the ER model, right? So what is E stands for and R stands for? E stands for entity. R stands for relational. So we will be called entity relational model, ER model. So ER model are going to be represented with the help of ER diagrams, entity relationship diagram. Before that, we have to understand what do you mean by entity and entity set. So we are going to discuss about an entity and entity set. For any database, you are going to make a model like, as I mentioned, a data model. It's going to define between the logical relationship among the data, how it's get interconnected. So database, a database, if you are going to build a ER model, first you should select the entities. The database is a collection of entities, and it should tells about what is the relationship among the entities. Now you should know what do you mean by entity. So entities are nothing but your real-time object. So what how we called a real-time object will be called as a any entity. The real-time object means, for example, a person. If you are going to make another database entity set, people or person, it's going to be your entity. For university database, student will be entity, professor is one entity, uh, non-teaching staff is one entity, programmer is one entity. Uh, Likewise, people can be act as entity. So what all the real-time object you are going to able to connect will be called as a entity. Other examples are like a company itself entity, plant entity. If you are consider you are going to build a ER diagram for a car production system or car manufacturing system, a car is an entity, a bird is an entity, a car contains operations, right? Um, a car having a car vehicle number is a primary key, and what is the manufacturer of car, function car. So we are going to discuss. Entity means it will be having your real-time object. Fine. The next is you should know what I mean by attribute. Attribute means, like for example, all entities have certain attributes. As I have mentioned, if I talk about the car, whether the car is SUV or MUV or sedan, that is one attribute. And what is the width, height, what is the ground clearance, that is attribute of the car. I can say, like for car, whether it is diesel or petrol, what depending on the fuel is attribute of the car. The same, if we consider a people should contain a name, address, which location it belongs to. So these are all the attributes for any entity. So entities should have the attribute. So these are all the terminology. Only you should know what do you mean by entity, what do you mean by attributes for the entity. And now you should know what do you mean by entity set. The entity set is a collection of entities of same data type that share the same properties. So that means whenever you are going to make an entity set, so as I mentioned, entity set is like student is one entity and professor is another entity for an university database. So all the if I talk about a student and professor, so student and professor are two different entity sets because student have own property, professor have own property. That means own attribute. So that means whenever you are making or creating an entity set, it should have the uh, same attribute for the particular object, and you should share the same property. Then only we can make an entity set. So example, you can say a set of all persons or a company's trees, holidays or entity set. So entity set is student register number is our attribute, name is attribute, address, mobile number or attribute. A student is an one entity set. So professor name, professor ID, and designation, salary. You are not getting salary attribute, so I am getting salary attribute. So I belongs to one entity set, you belongs to one entity set. Likewise, you have to create your entity set. So I'm going to show an example, important example for entity set. So all the entity set you can identify by in the table itself. So whenever you are creating the table, right, from the table itself, you can identify what all the entity set. So I'm going to consider two table. Customer is one table, loan is another table. So is it possible to convert ER diagram to table? Yes, you can convert your entity relationship diagram into the table, and from the table you can easily identify how many entities and what are all the attributes of the entities. If I ask about this example, I could easily identify like two table is there, right? Customer is table, loan is another table. I can say two entity set are there. Customer is one entity set, loan is another entity set. Listen carefully. I didn't use the terminology customer is an entity, loan is an one entity. I'm using entity set. Why I called entity set? Entity set contain the attributes along with the entity because I'm having the attributes here. Attributes are customer ID is attribute. So whatever the column name you are using for the customer will be called as attribute customer ID, customer name, customer state, and customer city. So these are all the attributes for the customer entity. So we can say entirely as a customer entity set. So another entity we are having entity set we are having known as a loan entity set. So in the loan entity set, I'm having attribute of loan number as well as the amount. So our loan number and amount will be the properties or attributes for the loan entity. So this is another entity set. So all the entity sets can be easily identified here. So the attributes you have represented as a column name in your relational database model. when you are converting ER diagram into relational model, so the entity you have to label, make it as a table. The attributes of the entity will be created as a column name. So that's why we own this. For loan entity set, we are having loan number and amount as your attribute. So define an attribute as I have mentioned here. A entity is represented by a set of attributes. Set of attributes is, for example, a customer means we are having our customer ID, customer name, customer street, and customer city. So all the four attributes is belong to the customer entity. So this is the attribute. Loan having a loan number and amount. Fine. And how the attributes is going to be defined. So what do you mean by attribute? So attribute will always contain one value, permitted value. That is very important. Permitted means you are making the attribute of the respective data type. For example, address. Address. Always when you entering your address, you will be having three attribute like door number, street name, then we will be having street name and city name. Likewise, if you having a three attributes for the door number, now it's okay. Door number, it should be a number. If you make a data type as a number, only those values will be allowed to store in the respective attribute. Okay, nowadays the flat it's combination A1 is one number, or only some of the flats only they will be label it as number. So that's why we are using a var character. It will contains both the character as well as the integer. So whatever the permitted values you are allowed for an attribute, so then only we can able to store. If it is 10-digit number, means only 10-digit is allowed to store for a mobile number. So that is the thing. So we are going to define or how many types of attributes for the entity set. So basically, we are having a three types of attributes. The very first attribute is known as your simple attribute. Second category is about single valued or multi-valued attribute, and third type is about a derived attribute. So what do you mean by simple on composite attribute? If I talk about the simple and composite attributes, if I consider a student entity set, student register number can be act as a simple attribute. Okay, then student address. If I talk about the address consists of composite attribute. Composite attribute means it have two or three attributes to form a single attribute. If I ask address means if you simply tell your house home number, I can't able to identify your entire address. If you tell only the city name or pin code, I can't able to identify. So composite attributes is a collection of attributes we will be having like door number, street name, then we'll be having city name, pin code. All together will be combined as act as a composite attribute for the address. Even for name, if you ask about the name also you can have the composite attributes: first name, middle name, and last name. So this is the example for composite attributes. If you are going to store only the single value, uh, uh, single valued attribute is another type. If we are having only one value for the particular attribute, that is known as a simple. N number of attributes together or grouply aggregated to form a composite attribute. The second type of attribute is known as your single valued or multi-valued. If it is a single valued, it's like your register number is a single valued, fine. Uh, Multi-valued attribute, you can say phone number. Why phone number as a multi-valued attribute means like you're having a primary mobile number and secondary mobile number, right? So multi-valued for the same attribute, you can have n number of value. That is known as your multi-valued attribute. Single value means if I ask about the father name contains only a single value. So likewise, depending on the attribute, you have to think whether it is a single valued or multi-valued. Likewise, you have to design your schema. So the next third type of attribute is known as your derived attribute. So derived attribute means already the attribute value will be there. From that, if you are going to compute or if you are going to perform any calculation on the particular attribute in order to create a new attribute, it's known as your derived attribute. As real-time example, always they will be asked a date of birth. We will not ask about your age. Whenever you are entering any, giving a student any information, personal information, always date of birth is valid. Why? Because I could able to identify whenever I will be refer the table or retrieve the table. If I want to identify the age exactly, the date of birth will be manipulate or manipulate processed with the current system date and time. Or will be called current server system server date and time. So when it mapped with server date and time, exactly I could identify what is the current age. I can process like for example 27 years, 2 months, 18 days old, exactly for seconds you can if you want to calculate. So generally we'll be having month and days. So we'll be having 27 years, 2 months, 6 days old. Likewise, I can able to calculate if you know the date of birth. From the date of birth, I can able to derive the attribute known as a age column. So this is the different types of attribute known as your derived attribute. Any doubt, guys? Following? Yeah. So example for composite attribute. Composite attributes, as I mentioned, name contains first name, middle name, last name. So all together will be combinedly to represent the name attributes. That's why composite attribute. Try to know the difference between the composite attributes and multi-valued attribute. Both are different. Multi-valued means one column contains n number of n number of different value. But here composite attribute means all three attributes will be aggregated towards a single attribute. Here name is a composite attribute having because it needs so many information, two or more information to make this attribute. If I talk about the address, street, city, state, postal code will together will be called as address. With a street also again a street number, street name, apartment number. So I could say like street is one composite attribute, address is another composite attribute. So from that address field only, you'll be able to access, you'll be able to create these attributes. So then, what do you mean by relationship set? So relationship set. Uh, so you consider a two relation. For example, the previous example itself, customer is one entity, loan is another entity. The relationship set, how the customer is going to be relate with your loan. So if you are going to make a relationship set will be represented in the form of a decision symbol or will be called it represented by the diamond symbol. So in the diamond symbol, customer and loan, customer hyphen loan you can write. If you know the exact relationship, you have to mention customer entity and loan borrower. Borrower is the relationship between the customer and loan. You can write. If you don't know the exact relationship, you can simply write customer hyphen loan being the decision symbol. So what is a relationship is that what is the relationship is how the entity set is get associated with the several entities. For example, yes, yes,
Nothing, sir.
yeah. So if I consider a customer name is known as Ace. So Ace having the account number of A hyphen 102. Uh, you have to know for a bank have n number of relationship with the customer because you consider a bank database. A customer can hold a savings account or a customer can hold a salary account. Okay, fine, it comes under savings account. Or the customer may be a borrower, maybe he got house loan or personal loan or car loan, uh, or they will be able to use banking transactions. So I have to identify what is the relationship for the particular account. So if it is a savings account, what all the operations can be done? Savings account means like he can deposit or withdraw the money. He can able to do two relations. So in that example, I can say Ace is a customer, so he will able to perform deposit. Like he is a depositor, he is going to deposit some money into the account. So Ace is one entity, account number is another entity. What is the relationship is what is the activities is going to perform by the customer. Based on this, the relationship set it will be defined. So whenever you go for relationship set, is it possible to have only one relationship set among the entities? No, you can have n number of relationship between the entities, like a depositor and it's one entity withdraw, or they can even Ace can borrow the loan borrower for the bank. So n number of relations can be created. So if you are going to represent the relationship set in the mathematical expression, so if you have n is number of relations entities. So when the entities will happen, n is we can have n number of relationship set, but like greater than or equal to two. Why it is two? Anyone? Always, whenever you are establish the relationship, at least you have to make a relationship between the two entities. So that's why two. Between the two entities only you can make a n number of relation. That's why two is fixed. N greater than or equal to two entities. So each taken from entity set. Here entity set like small letter E1, E2 up to E1 is a relationship. Capital letter E1, E2, En is your entity set. So all the relationship it belongs to E1. So for example, E1 belongs to E1, E2 belongs to E2, En belongs to En. That means small letter En is a relationship. That relationship belong to entity set 1. Then E2 relationship is belong to entity set 2. So for example, if you consider A is an account is belongs to the depositor. Depositor is a relationship. Capital E1 tends to E1. So it's a subset. You can say depositor relationship is a subset of the entity set 1. Entity set 1 at least it contain two entities. So I can keep on write this A's, comma A hyphen 1 or 2 is a subset of depositor, right? So withdraw. Likewise, I can write A's, comma A some other account number tends to borrower. If Ace wants to get a loan, personal loan of 2 lakhs, so you have to mention like this a relationship set. So for any doubt, shall I move on to?
No, sir.
Okay, listen carefully. I'll stop up to this. This is the last one I'm going to discuss. So I'm having your customer entity set and loan entity set. This is a customer table and loan table. Okay, fine. So you have to say how many entities set here, how many entities set you can represent from this table. This is a relational model. This is not a ER model. This is a relational model. From the relational model, you have to identify what is the ER model. So now you have to say how many entity set is there. Yes, anyone? If you are not answer, then it's not used to continue. Then it means you didn't understood. Is anyone how many entity set is there? What is an entity set? Yes, guys, why you are not responding? Okay, but you can unmute your mic and say, right, Mohammed, you are correct only. Okay, two entity set. What are they? Customer and loan. Why it is called two entity set? Entity set means it have their own set of attributes. So customer is one entity set, loan is one and another entity set. If we talk about the customer entity set, it have the set of own attributes. What are the attributes? Account number, name, then
Balance.
okay, correct. Account number, name, branch, you will have, right. If we talk about the loan, we will be having your loan number uh, and balance. So this is your attribute for the loan entity set. So as I mentioned, if you want to make a relationship between the customer and loan, always borrower. So borrower is the relationship set. Fine. So what is this uh, mapping? This is known as a mapping cardinalities. We will be discussed in detail. There are many mapping cardinalities: one to one, many to many, many to one. Four mapping cardinalities is there. So if I talk about this particular account number having the loan number L17. So L17 is the loan number belongs to this account holder Jones having the balance of 1000. So 1000 he have borrowed. Fine. Likewise, you take another example, the same loan number which get mapped with the another account holder Williams. So Williams is also belongs to the same account holder. Why? In what situation? If the borrower, if the particular customer is maybe act as a applicant and co-applicant for this scenario for getting the same loan, so it has to map with the two customer, so applicant and co-applicant. So that's why many to one mapping. This is many to one mapping. So you take another scenario in Smith having two loan account number L23 and L11. So L23 he having 2000 balance. L23 may be a home loan. L11 may be a car loan. Okay, so the person can have the two loans from the same bank. So that's why many to one customer. So this is one to one mapping here. Remaining on all one to one mapping. So likewise, based on the mapping cardinalities, you have to tell about the customer and loan relationship set. I'll stop up to this. Remaining, I'll be discussing next class. If you have any doubt, you can ask. And meanwhile, we just go through the PPT as well as I'm going to upload the ebook also. Uh, read the material and prepare well for Unit 1. You have any doubt?
No, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Emily.
So, excuse me.